Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Father Mike Clark. I'm a priest of the Diocese of Owensboro in Kentucky, and I am a member of the Alumni Board of Directors. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our presenter this afternoon. Cassie Schutzer is the director of the St. Meinrad Young Adult Initiative, which accompanies parishes throughout the Midwest in ministering with young adults. Her first experience with St. Meinrad was at a young adult ministry symposium long ago in 2021. Cassie joined our staff in July 2022, and in her first year has hosted gatherings for ministry leaders, led presentations on best practices in young adult ministry, and worked to integrate the Young Adult Initiative into St. Meinrad Seminary and School of Theology. Cassie received her undergraduate degree from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and is pursuing a master's in theology from St. Meinrad. Before coming here, she spent 10 years working in parish and campus ministry in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Cassie's presentation this afternoon is entitled, Known and Loved, a Relational Approach to Young Adult Ministry. Please join me in welcoming Cassie Schutzer. She let me twang her last name.
Yeah, I was like, if you say it with a southern accent, it'll sound right. Okay, so I'm a bit of a wanderer, so I'm gonna try and disconnect this little guy. Okay, can everyone hear me okay at this volume? Perfect. Okay, so I am gonna begin in prayer. I think it's important. So if you'll join me, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. God, we thank you for this time to be together. I thank you for all the people in this room who have come here to learn something about ministry with young adults, who have come to hear what you have to share with all of us. I ask you to use me in this next hour as your instrument. Speak through me, Lord. Give me the words to say, and I ask you to just be really present in this room with us as we talk about how to better reach out to our young people, how to involve them in our parish communities, and how to love them better. And I ask all of these things in the name of Jesus Christ, your Son. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, that got a little of the nerves out. Okay, so as Father Mike said, my name is Cassie. I just started here last year as the director of the Young Adult Initiative. I'm really, really jazzed to be here talking to you guys about ministry with young adults. It's very near and dear to my heart as a young adult, but also, this is what I've done for the past 10 years, and it's really incredible to see the changes and the discoveries and the insights that we find in this ministry. So currently I am the director of the St. Meinrad Young Adult Initiative. I was born in Durham, North Carolina, raised in North Carolina, lived my whole life in North Carolina, and then just moved to Indiana a year ago. So it's been an adjustment, but it's been great, honestly. I am a graduate of the University of North Carolina. There are several. Go Tar Heels. We are the University of North Carolina. After I graduated from UNC, I spent 7 years working in a parish, and I did communications and young adult ministry at St. Thomas More, which was an incredible experience. Loved working in the parish. And in August, I'm starting classes here to get a master's degree in theology. So Am I excited? Yes. I'm like equal parts nervous and excited about starting school again. But I think it'll be a fun adventure. Haven't been in school in like 10 years, so it's a little intimidating, but it'll be good. And then I love to knit, I love to bake. Anyone who works with me will tell you. Most of all, I love spending time with the people in my life. And I hate tomatoes. I never liked them, never liked tomatoes. It's the only dislike I could think of. Okay. So, as Father Mike said in the intro, my first experience with St. Meinrad was actually in 2021. So I just want to tell you kind of the story of finding St. Meinrad and coming to be here, because I think it speaks to some of the things I'm going to talk about today. So I was working at the parish, 2021, COVID, we were trying to figure things out, we were doing the best we could. And this St. Meinrad Young Adult Initiative decided to host a bishop symposium here. And my bishop was invited, and he couldn't make it. And so he delegated to our diocesan director, who couldn't make it. So she, all the way down until it got to me at the parish. And they were like, Cassie, you can go to a bishop symposium. You can represent the Diocese of Raleigh. I was like, all right, if you're sure. And so I got here, and I was so blown away by this place. I was blown away by the community, even just the drive-in. I don't think I'd ever seen like corn before. So yeah, it was amazing, honestly. And I say that the week really did change my life, and I say that standing here as the director of the Young Adult Initiative. So I mean it. I came back a year later, to work here. And the reason it changed my life is because being here at St. Meinrad with that community of ministers, I could tell how much their heart was in it. They wanted to serve young people so badly that they came to Southern Indiana on a weekend outside of work hours, and they spent 3 days learning about how we can better minister to young adults. We spent the week in prayer together. It was really formational for me. I didn't realize how much I needed prayer and silence in my days, and we had that. And I got to pray, Vespers with these monks that I didn't even know existed until, 2021. I mean, it's really incredible. And then I just felt very validated in what I was seeing in the parish and the things that they were talking about that they had seen in the Young Adult Initiative. And I'm going to get into all of that, but it was just really cool to be a part of that community. So I tell this story for two reasons. I think first, I probably speak for all of us in this room when I say, we all have a love for St. Meinrad. It's why we're here. We all have an experience here. We all have an encounter with St. Meinrad that brings us back. And I just think this place is special. And the other reason I tell this story, which kind of gets me into the first points of this talk, is that there's so much power in a good encounter in a place. And what was great about the week here at St. Meinrad is they didn't force me to have an experience. They didn't, schedule out every second of the day in order to, send me home with something that they had decided I was going to walk away with. They really just brought the people together, created the environment, and made sure that we had what we needed in order to really have an encounter with God and to have an experience that was meaningful. I just thought that was amazing. It wasn't overly programmed. It wasn't super scheduled. It was just what it needed to be. And I probably speak for all the people who attended that, because a lot of us stayed in contact after, which I think is really cool. And so I cannot overstate the power of a good encounter, especially for young people when they're really making the decisions now of whether they want to come to our parishes or not. whether they want to commit to a life of faith or not, and whether they want to practice that faith with our communities. So we have that opportunity to be that for people, to be a place where they can encounter one another and encounter God. And I'll circle back to that, like a lot, because it's important. Okay, so I want to lay a little bit of foundation quickly, give you the 10-cent tour, so to speak, of the Young Adult Initiative. Basically, phase 1 started in 2017 with a grant from the Lilly Endowment. And really that first 5 years of the Young Adult Initiative was about information gathering, it was about research, it was about best practices. It involved a lot of parish accompaniment. We had 16 parishes who did this work with us. And at the end of that first phase, we published a report, which basically, sent out all of our findings that we had discovered from doing this work for 5 years. And the reason that Lilly began this work, we were one of 12 Christian communities selected, the only Catholic community, which I think is pretty cool, is they were noticing the lack of young adults in our parishes, and they wanted to invest in places that can help figure out where are young adults, why aren't they coming to our parishes, and how can we better, establish those connections with them? What do they need, and how can we be there? So that phase lasted 5 years. When I came in last year, we were starting phase 2, which lasts until 2026, and 5 of those initial parishes who spent 5 years with us have recommitted for another 5 years. And each of those parishes has chosen a sister parish, we call them. So there's a mentor-mentee relationship between the parishes. And so they're kind of bringing these new parishes into the fold to see if the things that we're learning are transferable between parishes. Like, does this work? Do we have something? And so far, we're only a year in, but it's really incredible the change that can happen in parishes in a year, and the whole staff and everyone is committed to reaching out to young people. So that's kind of the timeline of the Young Adult Initiative. And at the end of phase 2, one of our goals is to produce a resource, or be able to disseminate this information that parishes can use who are interested in doing this work, and who maybe have never thought that they had the tools to start young adult ministry. We're here to tell them that they do. Anyone can do this if you're committed. And some ways that we serve the church, I mentioned parish accompaniment. We currently have 10 partner parishes in 4 states throughout the Midwest. And so I go visit them, they come here for gatherings. We have this relationship, we have this community with our partner parishes. And so a lot of our learnings are coming straight from the parishes. So a lot of what I'll talk about is their experiences in parish and my own as well. We do research and dissemination. The research was more, phase 1 was a huge research focus. And so right now we're just trying to share, some of this information that we found. And then we also are part of the formation of seminarians, priests, and lay ministers. And this is like a seed right now, but it's growing, and we're becoming more integrated, with the seminary formation, with lay minister formation here, to be able to be a resource for, the guys who will go on to serve in parishes, and the lay people who come here to receive degree and go back and lead in their places as well. And then I also want to mention that the Young Adult Initiative works with 2 other offices within St. Meinrad. We're part of this larger Center for Youth and Young Adult Evangelization. So we have One Bread, One Cup, which people might be familiar with, is part of it, the Young Adult Initiative, and then the Office for Hispanic and Latino Ministry as well. So we all work together under this umbrella of the center. Okay, so that's just like basic intro. So I have 4 things I want to do in this presentation. So I want to talk a little bit about who are young adults. I want to talk about what are young adults searching for. How do we respond to what they're searching for? And then what is this new approach to ministry that we're trying with these parishes? Which some could argue is a very old approach to ministry. It is the original approach to ministry. So who are young adults? It's really funny. We had a team from the Lilly Endowment come out, I don't know, maybe like a few weeks ago, and they were doing interviews with some of our parish leaders, and they asked each of them this question, and every single person had a different answer, and nobody mentioned age, which I thought was really fascinating. So this is like the perennial question, is who are young adults? And it depends who you ask. And I think sometimes, we talk about age to try and give it some brackets. So I'll go through a couple definitions of who are young adults. So the USCCB will define a young adult as anyone between the ages of 18 and 39, which, that's a lot of life. There's a lot that happens between the ages of 18 and 39. I'm like towards the latter third of that. And I can't even imagine, how much different I'll be by the end of that age bracket. And I'm so different from how I was at 18. So this is a helpful bracket, but it kind of feels like a catch-all sometimes. It's like, you're all young adults, but the needs are different. The Young Adult Initiative, we went with the Lilly definition for the project's sake. And so we defined a young adult as anyone between the ages of 23 and 29. When I was working in Chapel Hill, we defined it as 21 to 35. So basically the point of this slide is that there's really no clear-cut definition of what age bracket is a young adult, and it varies so wildly, and so therefore there is no one-size-fits-all ministry for this group of people. The needs are so vastly different. I want to preface this slide by saying I am not a psychologist, and this is not my area of expertise. So Jim, if I make a mistake, you can just thumbs up, thumbs down me. So for context, it might be good. One of our seminarians right now is actually doing an independent study on where developmental psychology meets young adult ministry, and so I totally stole this from him. But basically, he talks about two people. So Erik Erikson, who is a psychologist, developed these 8 stages of psychosocial development. And so he puts young adulthood in stage 6, which means nothing for any of us, except that this is the time in our life when we're deciding who are the people we're going to invest in. What are these permanent relationships that are going to be in our lives? Erikson would say, the end goal of this stage, and the sign that you're ready to move on to the next, is when you learn how to love. That's what Erikson would say. James Fowler is a Methodist minister, he was a researcher. He kind of took this idea and translated it into faith, and he made these stages of faith. And he puts young adulthood in stage 4, which is the individuative reflective stage, which kind of goes along with that. But basically what that is it's following the stage of conformity. So, think of high school students who are going through, maybe the confirmation prep process or things like that. They're learning the basics. They go to church because their parents bring them to church. You do things because it's what's expected of you in community. When you reach the next stage, where the young adults are, you decide for yourself. You have to take ownership of your faith. No one's forcing you to do anything anymore. And so it's a time of struggling, and he says angst, of wrestling with the faith. And you're deciding, do I believe this faith that comes from my family, or whatever origin the faith came from, or do I accept it on my own? So this is some context for where the young adults are. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I thought this was good for context as well. Springtide Research Institute does studies each year on not young adults, 13 to 25 is their age category, so it's young people, but it's basically the state of young people and faith. And they do a study and they come out with these findings. And their most recent study from 2022 was on mental health. And so there's 2 things I want to pull out of this. And the first, I don't think will be a surprise to anyone, but they said, mental health issues are on the rise. with young people. I don't think that's a secret, and it's not just young people who experience mental health issues. But one of the numbers that came out of that study was that 47% of young people say that they are either moderately or extremely depressed. And that's just one question. I mean, they talk to them about anxiety and stress and, all this stuff. 47%. 1 in 3 young people would say that they are not flourishing in their mental and emotional health. 1 in 3 young people. I think that narrative is not new to us. We hear that all the time, constantly. But what I like about this study is the second thing I'm going to bring in, which we don't hear about all the time, is that religious practice, the young people who said they have a faith, they practice the faith, that is connected to flourishing. They are more likely to say that they are flourishing than young adults or young people who say that they are not connected to a community who do not practice their faith. 57% agreed that their religious practice is connected to flourishing. So I think that's good context for us to keep in mind, that it's not always, we don't always get the full picture of this. The second was on faith and religion. This is from the same study. The majority of Gen Z identifies as religious or spiritual, which actually came as a surprise to me. I think we hear all the time, young people don't care about faith. That's why they're not here. They don't care. That's not true. They do. 77% of Gen Z considers themselves spiritual, while 68% considers themselves religious, which I was really blown away by that number because I've never heard that before. So while they identify as religious and spiritual, they do not identify with one tradition of faith, which I think is interesting. 62% of young people agree that they find truth in different religions. And what Springtide called this was faith unbundled. So it's this idea that, that feels true. I'm going to take that from there. That feels true over here. I'm going to take, it's like, what is it, State Farm, like home and auto insurance or something? It's like it's bundled. They're bundling it. They're searching for meaning, but it's not through one faith tradition, which is interesting. And I think that makes sense then, that it follows that they're not necessarily members of our parishes or our religious communities. Only 40% said that they are a member or affiliated with a religious institution. So why do I bring in, I'm not like a huge numbers person, I'm not gonna lie, but I bring this up because I think sometimes we tend to stop at like the bad, right? We tend to hear the bad or the scary statistic, right? And we don't see the fuller picture. So yes, it's true young people are struggling, but they have identified that faith, religion, spirituality, practice leads to their flourishing. They've identified this. They're telling this to us. They're interested in it. They're seeking it out, but they're not coming to our parishes, right? So that's where we come in. I mean, that last one of, 40% say that they're a member. And remember, this is 13 to 25 is this age range. I don't know that this is true or not. I'm sure someone can fact check me. But from what I've seen from young adults, the 23 to 29, I wouldn't be surprised if that was lower. Because I think a lot of those young people are still being brought to Mass by their parents, or they're going where their families go. But then, once people kind of move on and start new jobs, move new places, they wouldn't necessarily say, yeah, I'm a parishioner here, or I'm registered here. So this is just stuff to keep in mind as we move forward. So who are young adults after all of this? That was just a little bit of context. They're people who are in the midst of major life transitions in a short period of time. They're making permanent commitments, whether that's marriage, job, vocation, entering religious life, whatever it is. They're committing themselves. They're searching for meaning and purpose, and they value authenticity and relationship. And I think the rest of my talk will focus a lot on this relationship, And so I think it's helpful to also define who are young adults in relationship to us. We all have them in our lives, right? There are sons and daughters, our siblings, our nieces and nephews, our grandchildren, our neighbors, our friends. They're in our lives. They're everywhere. And they're worth our investment and our love. Okay, so now that we know who we're talking about, I also want to say, I try not to put young adults kind of in a box. And so that's why, ages are helpful, situations are helpful. I'm not describing every young adult. So I also want to put that out there. So that is in general who young adults are. So what are they searching for? What are they searching for in life, from our churches, from us? I think one of the best ways I can sum it up, and I obviously have slides, so it's not the end of it, is they're searching for a way to make meaning out of their lives. They're searching for a way to integrate their faith into their daily lives. They want to live a life that is integrated, that is full. So they want to know, how do I live a life of faith? And who can I count on to live this life with me? Those are the two things. So a researcher, Dr. Haley Scott, she's actually the leader of one of our other young adult hubs. This is at Denver Seminary. She talked to just a bunch of young adults in 30 different congregations, and she pulled out these 10 longings, these things that they're longing for from our parish communities. Remember my name. Understand me. Make room for me. Be present to me. Stay with me. Be real with me. Tell me the truth. Teach me, trust me, and help me to do something. And this is coming from young adults. I mean, they're telling us what they're looking for. Earlier this year in January, a bunch of us went to St. Louis for the SEEK conference. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, it's this big, yearly conference hosted by Focus, who's a college campus ministry group. And I don't remember the numbers, but it was somewhere over 15,000 young adults were there, college students. And it was amazing. And they have adoration, and they have talks, and they have breakout sessions, and it's really cool. Definitely overwhelming, a lot of interactions with people, and it's absolutely exhausting, but it's so worth being there just to see the vibrancy of the church. And so St. Meinrad went, and we had this big board, and we had cards to hand out to young people, and we asked them for their prayer intentions. And we told them, put your intention on the wall. We're going to bring all of these intentions back to St. Meinrad, and our monks will pray for them. And they did, and it was really beautiful. And we asked them these two questions. What is on your heart, and who needs your prayers? And the response was incredible. We kept having to take cards off the wall because it kept getting filled up. It was really cool. And some common themes from these cards that we pulled out. Family healing and generational trauma. A lot of them carry a lot of wounds from their family of origin. That was big. Growth in faith and in virtues. We saw that a lot. The conversion of family members or friends. It was so interesting to see how many young people were praying for the conversion of their parents. Anxiety and uncertainty. Loneliness and feeling unloved or unknown. And the desire to know God more deeply. These were the main themes that we saw throughout the prayers, but there's many more that are not covered in this. And we sorted all the prayers into different categories after the Mass that the monks held. And we read through every single one of these cards, and we prayed for them. And we sorted them out, and we have, the 9 things that they prayed for the most, which, kind of follows the themes, but they get a little more drilled down. They pray for the people in their lives. There's so many prayer intentions for other people. They are super, super interceders for the people, intercessors for the people in their lives. They pray for conversion or reversion to the faith of themselves and of the people in their lives. Healing and health, a lot of chronic illness that young people are dealing with that you would never know. We saw chronic illness come up a lot, which was interesting. They pray for their vocation and the discernment of their vocation. They pray for family life, mostly for their own families, for marriage, and for relationships, a lot of times for their parents' marriage. They would pray for an increase of faith or virtue and an increase of trust in God. They prayed for the dead, and they prayed for those in mourning. Mental health and addiction, not the top prayer request, which, again, I think if you come in with preconceived notions, you might assume that would be the case, but it's up there. And they prayed for the unborn, for safe pregnancies, and for those struggling with infertility, including themselves. So I'm just going to leave that up there for a second, just to let those prayer intentions sink in. Because I think what was meaningful for me in reading through those intentions was how similar they were to the things I pray for. Like trusting God, I pray for that every day, like 10 times a day. I pray for the people in my life. I pray for my vocation. All these things that can feel very isolating for us. Like we feel like we're the only ones crying out to God about these things sometimes. But they're more uniting than we realize they are. I mean, it was really, really incredible. And then just to see the piles of papers, it was overwhelming. So the things that they're searching for are not so different from you and from me. I think we're all searching. That's why I named this Known and Loved. I think we're all searching at the end of the day for the same thing. Okay, so now that we know who young adults are, what they're searching for, how are we called to respond? And where can our ministry be, knowing all these things that I just talked about? And I do also want to say that the things I talk about are definitely not limited to young adults. Like, this is really good for parish ministry as a whole. Relational ministry works with any age. It's just the thing that we found is the most effective with young people. But this goes for anyone. So the first thing, and the thing I will always, always come back to, is it has to begin with relationship. It's in the title of the talk. Relational ministry. It has to start with relationship. Our God is a God of relationship, right? A trinity of persons, one God, a God of relationship. We're called to enter into this relationship with Him, and we're called to be in relationship with one another because of the love we have experienced from God. So this is what we're called to do, and we're called to invest our time in people. And I say people over programs. I don't mean to say that programs are unimportant, because they're not. There are programs that work, for sure. But it's about the people. It's about the people. And it's less about, finding that new program that looks amazing, like, this is the program for our parish, it's gonna save our parish. And then shoving all the people in the program and convincing them, like, come on, let's get the numbers up. But it's getting to know the people first, finding out what the needs are, and then, finding that program that might work for those needs. But there are good programs out there. I don't mean to disparage them. Young adults crave authentic, personal, and stable relationships. And I think that's like such a sweet spot for the parish, because the parish is a stable community. Jesus Christ in the Eucharist holds our parishes together. He is there all the time. We are a stable community of faithful people centered around the Eucharist, right? That's what young adults are craving. When we're in relationship with people, it gives us more of an opportunity to speak the truth in love. Not that we can't speak truth, in any aspect of our lives, but when we've earned the trust of young people, there's so much data to support they're going to listen more if we are in relationship with them. If they know we're invested in them, we have greater opportunities to speak the truth in love for their good. When we're in relationship with young people, we can recognize their gifts. And they become less like a warm body in the room and more like a person who has gifts, who can be directed to the place within our parish where their gifts can flourish and where they can really use those gifts to get involved and give back to the parish. They're unique and they have amazing gifts to share. And then it goes even beyond that, is not just recognizing the gifts that young people have and what they can do for us, but recognizing the gift that they are, just for who they are. A parish that doesn't have any young people in it, it's like missing part of your family. Like, it's not complete. But once we are in relationship, we can see those things, we can call out those gifts. So that's very important, just to begin with relationship. To go along with relationship is listening. Our parishes, when we first started in 2017, we asked them, okay, for the first year, don't do anything, which I think was really stressful for some of them. I was in parish ministry. I get this desire to go out and serve. I totally get that. But we challenged them for the first year, don't do anything. Listen, build relationships, learn who your people are, so that when you do go out and do something, you can do it more effectively, based on who they are and based on their needs. And then in that year, building those relationships means we can pour into leaders, potential leaders. You need young adult leaders in your parish if you're going to have good young adult ministry. So listen. How will we know them if we don't listen to them? They can tell us so much of what they need and how they can be involved in parish life if we listen. And one thing that our parish has found is that listening can be very healing for people. To feel heard and understood by someone can be very healing when we've experienced something, especially someone who's been hurt by the church maybe in the past. There might not be an action that could fully, close that wound, but listening can be very, very powerful. We saw it in our parishes. And we listen non-judgmentally, not coming in with, preconceived ideas of what we're going to hear. We listen without a formed response. You can tell when you're talking to someone who they're just chomping at the bit to get their 2 cents in. They're not really listening to you, they're just waiting for their chance to talk. They're just waiting for you to be done. So that's not listening. And as St. Benedict would say in the rule, you listen with the ears of the heart. So you listen how God listens. You see how God sees, or you strive to, right? It's a deeper kind of listening. That's how we listen to anyone. But that's how we challenge the parishes to listen to their young adults. This is a big one. It's interesting. I think when we first started the Young Adult Initiative, I think the idea was we just need to, build programs that are for young adults. They'll come if there's a program that's geared towards them. But it quickly, over that first year, turned into, after the listening and after the learning about experiences, it became more about, what is the culture of our parishes? What are we inviting young people into? And this is not true of every parish, and so I might not be describing the parish where you are, but this is just based on a lot of things that we heard and we saw and experiences of young adults. So we challenge the parishes to look through a new lens, like assess your parish through a new lens, as if, and try and be as impartial as you can possibly be, because we care about our parishes. And sometimes it's hard to see like where we could have done better. So this list of questions is not exhaustive by any means, but they're just helpful to think about it. So is the parish easy to access, for one thing? Like if a young adult were to pick up a bulletin, if that happens, young adults do pick up bulletins, by the way, sometimes. If there's a meeting going on, right, and it says, oh, we're gonna meet in the St. Teresa room in the parish center, would they know where that is? Or is that like insider language, If it's, a call for catechists, right, and you have to be SET trained, would they know? That's a safe environment certification. Like, would they know these things? And I think this definitely goes as well for like new people in the parish, especially people who joined our parishes during COVID, who maybe didn't have like a normal welcome into the parish environment. Do we put up too many barriers to entry without even realizing it? Are people welcoming at our parish? Like, are people actually welcoming? This might be controversial to say. Some of the least welcoming people I've ever met in parishes are like the greeter ministry. Because, and this is not, again, I've met some wonderful greeters, but sometimes it just feels like you just showed up 20 minutes before Mass so you could chat with your friend, and like you're not even saying hi to anyone when they come in. That's not a greeter. So are our parishes welcoming? When a young adult family brings their kids to Mass and their kid like starts crying, does everyone immediately like turn their head and like glare at them? Because one of our parishes who joined in the second phase, like that was the culture of their parish. And they lost all of their young adult families, all of them. Like they started, a new pastor came in the year we started working with them. And they had to work against, like that was the word on the street about that parish. Like if you're a young person who has a young family, don't go to that parish because you're not welcome there. When young adults get engaged and they call the parish to schedule their wedding, is the first thing they hear, well, are you a registered parishioner? Because if that's the question, they're probably not, unless they're going to their parish, where they grew up, where their family is. I get the need to be a registered parishioner at a parish, totally understand that, but start with a congratulations. It's these little things that we can do to make the place more welcoming for young people. Are young adults invited into leadership roles in the parish? And if they're invited into leadership roles, are they able to bring their ideas? Or do they just kind of become like the workforce? You know what I mean? Like of the ministry. If we want the enthusiasm and the energy of young people in our parishes, we also have to be open to their ideas as well. It's got to be both. And about a year into this project, we really tried to change the language. It's not young adult ministry. It's not youth ministry for adults. It's not, monthly events or programs, but it's ministry with young adults. It's inviting them into parish life. It's helping them integrate into our parishes to find where is the place, where is the space in the parish where they can be and they can give of themselves to the community. Like that's what they're looking for. One of the important things our parish has learned is the need for intergenerational relationships and the need for more community among the different generations, more opportunities for people to meet each other, to get to know each other, and to invest in each other. Mentorship is huge. A lot of young people report not having an adult in their lives that they can trust. That is so needed, especially when we're passing on the faith. Like we need people who are a few steps further along in the process. And at the same time, it is a reciprocal relationship. I think generations need each other. You know, there's a wisdom and there's a perspective that I sorely need as a 29-year-old, you know, from the older friends that I've made in my parish. And I think vice versa, they really enjoy like experiencing life again through, you know, the things that I tell them, or, you know, it's just really cool to see those friendships. So these are really needed. And I mentioned the Springtide studies that they do each year. In 2020, their study was on relational authority. And 79% of the young people who responded agreed and said, I'm more likely to listen to adults in my life if I know they care about me. So this mentorship, this accompaniment is born out of relationship. It's investing in young people. 87% of young people said they trust adults who take time to foster relationships. So often it's just about like allowing for, my old pastor used to call it a holy interruption of our day, right? Allow for those moments where we can just spend a few minutes, this not just for young people, but with anyone who kind of comes into our path, who could use someone to be with, who might be searching. So I touched on this a little bit with parish culture, but the idea of moving from welcoming to belonging is huge. Belonging, I think, goes a lot deeper than welcoming. It's like, you can be welcome at, like, do you guys have Harris Teeter around here? Is that a grocery? Meijer. You can be welcome at Meijer, right? You don't belong at Meijer. Our parishes are places where we can belong. Like, we are called to be in relationship in a parish in a different way than we're called to be in relationship, like at our gym. Even though those are good and healthy friendships, it's just different. It's belonging. So it's less about planning these, you know, perfect events that go off without a hitch and we've got great attendance. It's less about that, and it's more about making sure that whatever we do in the parish, we're creating space for these meaningful encounters to happen. And that can look totally different depending on the parish. Like, it has to come out of the reality, I think, of the parish, of the community. But it's more about creating this space and less about, you know, planning these events. One thing about young adults, they don't need help filling their social calendar. Like, they're really busy people. So they're looking for spaces where encounters can happen that wouldn't happen somewhere else, potentially. I mentioned this before, but it's more about integrating young adults into parish life versus there's the space for the young adults, they meet over there, we don't really interact with each other until, you know, we see each other at Sunday Mass. But how can we integrate them into our communities? How can we invite them into our ministries? I talked about barriers to entry before. You know, if there's a ministry that meets during the daytime, it's probably no surprise that young adults who are working are not joining this ministry. So it might be less about, oh, they don't care, and more about it's not accessible. So even just finding those things and figuring out, you know, what are the right questions to ask here? Because it might not be what it looks like on the surface. And then in our Phase 1 report that we published in 2022, we asked the young adult respondents, what do you like about your parish's ministry with young adults? And 53% of them told us that it gave them a community and a place to belong. And that was far and away more than any of the other responses. That was huge. Young adult ministry gave them a place to belong in the parish. That was the gateway to deeper and greater involvement in the parish, was being in this community that was for them. I talked a little bit before about kind of the doom and gloom, you know, we call this the narrative of decline. It comes from, I think about 10 years ago, the Pew Research, they published a study, I think it was called Nuns on the Rise, or it was something like that, but it was all this information about disaffiliation. And that became like a huge key word. When talking about young people, it became synonymous with disaffiliation. And I think a narrative like that tends to reinforce itself at times. Is, okay, when we don't see young adults in our parish, we have to assume it's because of disaffiliation. And that might not be true. I mean, the data shows they're looking, they're searching, they're hungry. Disaffiliation doesn't tell the full story. And so it's more helpful to kind of move out of that narrative and move into one that's more hopeful and joyful. I have like the absolute privilege of seeing this happening in 10 parishes around the Midwest and more. Like we're reaching out to more parishes and getting to know them. Disaffiliation is not the story in these parishes. If anything, young adults are joining the parishes because this is where they're finding that sense of belonging. A lot of this is not giving into despair, and I think a lot of ministers are tired. I see this a lot as well. It's hard work. Like, this is not easy to do, and sometimes I think we get burnt out, and we need help, and we need more support, and it's really hard sometimes to invest in relationships when we don't think we're going to see anything from it. Like that, I realize that can be the reality for us when we work in parishes, when we're in these environments. So don't give in to despair. That's a big one. And then getting to know young people as individuals rather than as a demographic can be really helpful to reverse that narrative. I was talking to one of the pastors, maybe 6 months ago, and I remember he was saying, Cassie, I met with one of our young adult ministers, and they keep telling me, young people are depressed, young people are anxious, they're overcommitted, they're not coming. He was like, this is not my experience at all. I haven't met those young adults. Have I met the 5 joyful young adults that exist? But because he had gotten to know them as individuals, he was able to separate out, this is the narrative that's out there of this disaffiliation. And while that might be true to some degree, the study came from somewhere, right? The data came from somewhere. It's not a fuller picture. It is not the end of the story. We don't assume they're just going to disaffiliate at the end of the day. If that's the case, well, I guess I wouldn't have a job. Going along with that, not being afraid of failure is a big thing. When I first started here, I remember calling all of our parishes just to figure out, what do you guys have going on? What are your challenges? How can I walk with you? And I remember telling each of them, you have full permission to fail in this. I don't want you to be so afraid that we're expecting a certain outcome that you're not going to try things. You have permission to fail, and in fact, Lily will bankroll your failure if that's what it takes. Try something in your parish. Don't give in to fear. And this was it was like a weight off, because sometimes we can be afraid of trying something new or trying something different. Because even if what we're doing isn't working, it's what we know. It's hard to try something new. The idea of innovation that just feels like a lot of pressure at times. I have to come up with something that no one's ever tried before. When really innovation is try something new for your community. Maybe all it is one Sunday a month, the pastor is, up at the AMBO giving the announcements after Mass. And he says, any young adults in the church, come on in the narthex and take 5 minutes and I'll meet you and we'll talk. If your parish has never done that, that's innovation. It didn't have to be something, crazy. And then when I was in college, I remember I had this really intelligent professor, really smart guy, but he said this, and I haven't remembered anything else he ever said, but he did say this, and I've never forgotten it. He said, if it's not working, stop doing it. And that doesn't seem very profound when you hear it, but how often do we just keep doing what we've always done because that's what's familiar, right? We need to give ourselves permission to fail if that's what it takes to get closer to the thing that's more effective. And when we're not afraid to fail, when we are aware of our own limitations, our own weaknesses, that's where the Holy Spirit can act. When we know it's not up to us at the end of the day, that's where the Holy Spirit can act. Paul tells us, I boast of my weakness, right? Because it's when I'm weak, that's when I'm strong. When we are at our least, God can be at his most. So don't be afraid to try something new in the parish. I mean, why not, right? It might work. Meeting young adults where they are. If you think back to, I think it was one of the slides, the Springtide slides, where it said, they're not necessarily, they're interested in faith, they're interested in religion, but they're not joining our parishes, they're not joining our communities. One of the big things we found is they're not always going to come to us, right? We can't assume that if we put out the word, they're just going to come flocking to us. Sometimes first we have to go to them, and we have to meet them in spaces where they're comfortable. A lot of our parishes have found success holding their Bible studies or their small groups out in coffee shops. Local theology on tap at a bar draws in more people that you wouldn't have gotten had you hosted it at the parish. Like, making those concessions, being in spaces where they're comfortable first, can give you more of an opportunity to then invite them back into the parish. It might not be the first place they go, but to meet them in those spaces, we've seen that it's a lot more effective to bringing them back to the parish. So a lot of times we say, you hear the phrase like, meet people where they are, and then it kind of stops there. And one of the things we like to talk about is, meet people where they are, but then love them too much to leave them there. Like, keep walking, keep going, challenge them to come back to the parish. Form those relationships. Help them feel that sense of belonging. Enter into that mentorship role. And then, the doors are so much more open for us to bring them back into the parishes. And I say meeting them where they are is a spiritual thing, yes, but it's also like very physical. Like, go to the coffee shops, that's where they are. Go to the gyms, go to the bars. There's a bar back home in Durham where like any Sunday afternoon, like I go to mass and then I would go out to this, bar that has pizza and stuff. The whole place was full of young families because they had a space in the back that was like this little gated area with like games for kids to play. So there's a place for the kids, a place for the adults. These are not church-going people, but they're at the bar on a Sunday. Go there. And then I want to end this section with this slide, because all of the things that I've just talked about are drops in the bucket compared to this one, which is that we have to pray. We have to believe in the efficacy of our prayer. We have to be communities that pray and are alive and inviting young people into that life. They're looking for mentors. They're looking for people to walk this path with them. And we can't model for them what we don't practice ourselves. Like, young people will sniff out inauthenticity in 10 seconds. And you've probably seen the studies where they talk about trust. Like, trust in institutions, it's like at an all-time low. If they can't trust you, then they won't model themselves after how you live your life. Like, they'll see that. So we have to be people of prayer. We have to live the joy of the gospel. And the more we can conform our hearts to Christ, the more we can minister with a heart like his. And that's what we're called to do. So to sum up, there's no silver bullet to young adult ministry. So I didn't want to say that like in the beginning in case you're here for like a really quick, easy answer. There is no silver bullet because it's just life. It's just ministry. It's walking with people. It's relationships. I mean, relationships are lifelong and they take like constant I kill every plant that I've ever, Anna can tell you, her office is right next to mine. I kill every plant I've ever been given because it takes constant maintenance and care. It's like a relationship, right? You have to continually nurture it. There is no silver bullet, but the best way forward is to invest our time in people and become community. Become community. One of our parish leaders, Matt, he always says, we have to remember how to be a village again. He always says that, and he's right. It's this idea of being invested in each other's lives outside of the 1 hour we might see each other in the church building. To be a village is to be a part of life together, to walk together, to know what's going on in young people's lives, in each other's lives. And they're so hungry for that. And it's not just that, I said this in the beginning, my scope is young adults, but I think the world is very hungry for that. Like, they're hungry for these meaningful relationships. And we can be a part of that. So the last part of this is the vision. Like, where does this bring us for ministry? And I say it's a very old vision for ministry. I mean, it's from Jesus. So he's like the OG minister, right? He accompanied people throughout his time in public ministry. But before, I mean, he spent, 30 years in relative, obscurity, if you want to call it that. He lived life with people. He accompanied them. He was part of a family. He had friends before he ever, stepped out to do that public ministry. So when we talk about accompaniment, this is what we're talking about for a vision of ministry. So what is accompaniment? This is a word, if you pay attention to ministry with young adults, you're going to hear this word like a lot. Accompaniment is the buzzword right now. So I want to break it down just a little bit. So it's walking with and it's walking towards. So it's walking with each other towards Christ. Always a goal. It's not aimless. Sometimes we can meander, we lose our way at times, but there's always that goal in sight. We're walking towards something together. Accompaniment happens, as I said, when we walk with one another towards a common goal, which is Jesus Christ. And I don't mean for it to sound like a super letdown. Like, if you thought I was going to have a program idea, it's not easy. Like, don't be fooled by how short this slide is, basically. It's not easy to accompany. It challenges us. I don't think there's anything more difficult at times than being in relationship with people. Being in relationship with people means we experience the highs, the lows, the challenges, the joys, the suffering, all of it. I mean, it's the whole human experience. So to accompany people is not an easy way out of ministry, right? But it's effective. We've seen this. This is what the relational ministry is accompaniment. Accompaniment challenges us to reach out in love and to commit for the long haul. If you think back to the longings of young adults, be with me, stay with me, right? We're investing in them. So how do we accompany? Kind of what I touched on with the slide about prayer is we have to be people who are pursuing holiness in our own lives. We have to be answering our own call to discipleship. If we are going to accompany young people, we have to practice what we preach. We have to model what we want to invite them into. We have to pursue holiness in our lives. Active listening, I've already talked about this, but it's so important to listen to young people and then invite them to listen to us as well. It's a relationship, right? It's reciprocal. It's not one-sided. Listening, it goes both ways. If we can listen to them, build that trust, it's going to be so much more readily reciprocated. When we accompany, we also have to recognize our own limits on that. We have to recognize when we are overwhelmed. We have to recognize when we just have too much going on. I would venture to say you can't accompany too many people at one time. I mean, this is really, like, this is an investment. This is a relationship. So this is not like one, older adult has 100 young adults that they accompany. I mean, this is maybe 3 max. So to recognize our own limits in this, we have to be vulnerable with our young people. Not like spill your whole life story kind of vulnerable, right? But let them in and let them see us as sinners, as people who have been redeemed, as people who struggle, as people who experience our own sorrows, joys, like the whole range, as I said, of the human experience. To be vulnerable and to love them. And to love them for who we are, for who they are. Love the young people for who they are, and not disparage them for who we think they are. Like, get to know them, right? And they get to know us, and we are in relationship. So this is a quote from Christus Vivit, which was Pope Francis's apostolic exhortation. So after they had the synod for young people, faith, and vocational discernment, Pope Francis came out with this response. And this comes directly from conversations with young adults. So what are they looking for in a mentor? Who can we be for them? The qualities of such a mentor include being a faithful Christian who engages with the church and the world, someone who constantly seeks holiness, someone who is a confidant without judging, similarly, someone who actively listens to the needs of young people and responds in kind. Someone deeply loving and self-aware. Someone who recognizes his or her limits and knows the joys and sorrows of the spiritual journey. An especially important quality in mentors is the acknowledgement of their own humanity. The fact that they are human beings who make mistakes, not perfect people, but forgiven sinners. The quote goes on to say, mentors should not lead young people as passive followers, but walk alongside them, allowing them to be active participants in the journey. They should respect the freedom that comes with a young person's process of discernment and equip them with tools to do so well. A mentor should believe wholeheartedly in a young person's ability to participate in the life of the church. A mentor should therefore nurture the seeds of faith in young people without expecting to immediately see the fruits of the work of the Holy Spirit. So as I alluded to before, we might not always see the fruits, right? A lot of what we do is seed planting. A lot of what we do is helping to create that fertile soil in our parishes where the seeds can grow. But I will say that no amount of investment in relationships with young people, it doesn't matter who they are, young people, old, whoever, no amount of time invested in relationship is wasted. So even if you don't see fruits in your own parish, they're there. They're there. So what does this look like practically? These are just suggestions. So this is very basic stuff. All of us can do this, but I promise you these things make a difference. Saying hi to young adults at Mass. I moved here, is it August? I moved here a year ago, and I started going to this parish, in Louisville. I won't say which one, but I went there for 5 weeks in a row. No one ever said hi to me. No one waved at me. Even the sign of peace was kind of awkward because I would look over. Nobody. So I stopped going there, and I wonder if they noticed that I don't know. Nobody talked to me. So just say hi. It actually goes so much further than you can even possibly dream. Learn their names. That's a huge one. From phase 1, one of the stories that was shared with us is a young adult decided to register at a parish simply because people there knew his name. That was huge. He was new to the area. He didn't have that community, but he was named there. right? And being named is kind of that first step to being known. Remember them. If you notice that they're there a couple weeks in a row, like say hi a couple times. Like it's not a one and done situation, right? Like tell them you remember them from last time. Learn something about them. If they don't come one weekend and you see them again, tell them they were missed, you know? I think sometimes it's one thing to see people when they're there, but when they're not there, like do we miss them, right? Do we notice they're gone? I talked about this before, listening to each other's stories, listen to them, but then reciprocate and be vulnerable and tell them something about yourself. Like, be in relationship, build relationship. It can start as small as one conversation. Find a commonality. Invite them into your home. That was a huge one for me when I graduated from college. I didn't have family around. I got such a thrill out of going to people's houses and just having dinner with their family. And they didn't act any differently because I was there. Like the families that are full on chaos were full on chaos when I was there. And I appreciated that. Like they were themselves, right? Invite them into your home. Celebrate milestones and joys. I said before, young adulthood is a time of just constant transition. There's a lot that happens in a short period of time for some people. So being aware of those milestones and celebrating with them. But also on the flip side of that, young adults are adults. They experience like great sadness and pain in their lives. We have a whole like sub-ministry of the young adult ministry for women who have experienced miscarriage. Like that's huge right now in young adult ministry. And so being there for that, right? Celebrate with them, but mourn with them as well. Like, be with me, stay with me. That's what they're looking for. Pray with them and for them. One of my go-to, things to end a conversation, or when I was leaving a conversation, would just be to say, how can I pray for you, right? And you can learn so much about what people are going through by asking how you can pray for them. And then go pray for them. Like, you can build up that relationship even more through intercessory prayer. That was huge in our young adult ministry back home. We had a prayer wall. I would constantly be asking people, how can I pray for you, right? On Fridays, I would spend a holy hour in front of the Blessed Sacrament, just praying for the young adults. Pray for them. And walk towards Christ together. That's what I talked about with accompaniment. All of this is kind of wrapped up in that. And then kind of going all the way back to where I started at the beginning, to tie a little bow on this, is to remember the power of a good encounter. And if I went to a parish that did all of those things, like that parish would have me. Like I would donate to that parish. I would give them my money. I would volunteer. I would register. So we have this opportunity to be the places where these encounters can happen. And it honestly doesn't take much thinking outside the box. It's just looking for those moments where we can make the connection and deepen the connection and pray with each other and be this community that walks with each other towards our common goal. And so I want to end with two final thoughts. Two thoughts on this. The first is that the best way to minister to others is to be in relationship with Jesus Christ so we can love them as he does. I've said this so many times, but it's so important. We cannot invite people into something that we are not in ourselves. Like we have to know Jesus. We have to listen to him. We have to invite him into this work, because at the end of the day, this is what I want to end with. Like, it's his work. It's not ours. We're just a part of it. I think St. Teresa of Calcutta used to say, like, I'm a little pencil in the hand of God, right? He is the primary actor. We participate. We mediate his love so often. There's great opportunity in that. I'm not discounting, our role in this, but it's his work. We have to trust in it. I lied. This is the ending. This is my absolute favorite prayer when it comes to ministry. I use this all the time, and I love it. So I do want to end with this prayer. So feel free to read along, but I'll pray it out loud. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. It helps now and then to step back and take a long view. The kingdom is not only beyond our efforts, it is even beyond our vision. We accomplish in our lifetime only a tiny fraction of the magnificent enterprise that is God's work. Nothing we do is complete, which is a way of saying the kingdom always lies beyond us. No statement says all that could be said. No prayer fully expresses our faith. No confession brings perfection. No pastoral visit brings wholeness. No program accomplishes the church's mission. No set of goals and objectives includes everything. This is what we're about. We plant the seeds that one day will grow. We water seeds already planted, knowing that they hold future promise. We lay foundations that will need further development. We provide yeast that produces far beyond our capabilities. We cannot do everything, and there's a sense of liberation in realizing that. This enables us to do something and to do it very well. It may be incomplete, but it is a beginning, a step along the way, an opportunity for the Lord's grace to enter and do the rest. We may never see the end results, but that is the difference between the master builder and the worker. We are workers, not master builders, ministers, not messiahs. We are prophets of a future not our own. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.